Lakers Carpool is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First off, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast as well, with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to Lakers Carpool. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. We got a lot to cover between a couple Lakers games, some injury news, the always rotating and changing COVID news. Let's jump into it. Since my last episode, the Lakers have unfortunately extended their losing streak. So on my last episode, we talked about the Lakers' win against the Mavericks, which was a huge win. And then dealing with some COVID, not injuries, but people out for COVID. And then a bad loss to the Timberwolves. So since then, the Lakers have lost two more games, one to the Bulls and one to the Suns. And also, since in between those games, Anthony Davis injured his knee, which we talked a little bit about. We didn't have any news at the time, but he went out and it's come back that he has a sprained MCL. An MCL sprain in his left knee. So that means that Anthony Davis will be out for at least 4 weeks. He'll be reevaluated at 4 weeks. And, I'm not going to lie, I recently sprained my MCL actually playing basketball, So me and Anthony Davis, both in our age 27 years, sprained our left MCL. Anyways, not that any of you guys care, but that was a pretty surprisingly painful injury. I had also torn my ACL in that knee, and the sprain of my MCL in that same knee hurt way worse than when I tore my ACL, surprisingly. And the recovery for it's taken a bit of time. I'm not an NBA athlete, obviously, so I didn't have the same treatment and care that Anthony Davis will have, but I will say, very painful injury. There was a video of him when he hurt his knee going back into the locker room, and he just couldn't walk on it and collapsed. And I showed it to my wife, and I was like, "See, I wasn't being ridiculous when I hurt my knee. I was actually in a lot of pain also. So at least that validates me and my feelings when I hurt my MCL. Anyways, so Anthony Davis will be out for at least 4 weeks. He'll be reevaluated then. My guess is it'll take some more time after that. I'm probably guessing it'll end up being an 8-week injury, so he'll probably be gone for around 2 months. If we're lucky, it'll probably be 2 weeks after that 4-week point, so a total of 6 weeks. It would probably be optimistic. I would be very surprised if he came back right at that 4-week point. It depends on how bad the sprain is, I suppose, which I don't know how bad it is. But given the NBA level care and treatment, the Lakers have a really great training staff. It's possible maybe he's able to come back at 4 weeks, but I would given Anthony Davis and his injury history and how he treats his injuries, I feel like we're looking at an 8-week situation. And if we're lucky, a 6-week situation. I could be totally wrong, but that's just how I'm feeling, my assumptions given the situation. So we're without Anthony Davis for a while. We've been without Anthony Davis for the last 2 games where we played the Bulls and the Suns. The Bulls game actually went surprisingly well for the most part for the Lakers, aside from the fact that they lost. They played decently well. They played their offense looked great. They were hitting threes, making shots. Looking at the summary, the Lakers shot 51% from the field, 35% from three. Not great 3-point shooting night, but not bad either. Free throws were awful. The Lakers shot 63% from the free throw line. LeBron James led the Lakers with 31 points, and he led rebounds with 14 rebounds. Russell Westbrook had 8 assists. DeMar DeRozan went off. He had 38 points in that game. The Lakers just couldn't stop him. He didn't do too much early on, it felt like, in the game. And then down the stretch when the Lakers were trying to hold on and make a comeback and win the game, DeMar DeRozan just went off and was hitting everything, and the Lakers couldn't stop him, which is pretty unfortunate. It's tough without having Anthony Davis. And this is the thing that I hate about the Lakers situation right now with the COVID, the players missing for COVID reasons, and then the injuries, is I just feel like I'm making excuses the whole time. for why the Lakers aren't playing well. Because when you watch the games, you feel like the Lakers should still be able to play well enough to stay in the game and to be close. And that's what they did. They did that against the Bulls. It was a close game. They lost 115 to 110. It was only a 5-point game. They were well within it. They had plenty of opportunities to win that game, and they didn't, which makes it even more frustrating. The real killer for the Lakers against the Bulls were turnovers. They had a total of 19 turnovers in the game, just completely terrible, versus 10 turnovers for the Bulls. So remember when I said the Lakers shot 51% from the field and the Bulls shot 43%? That's great, except for the fact that the Lakers only took 82 shots and the Bulls took 93 shots. So down the stretch, I mean, I guess if you look at it, the made shots, the Lakers made 42 and the Bulls made 40. But the Lakers are giving the Bulls way too many opportunities with those 19 turnovers. And the free throws also, like I mentioned, the Lakers went 14 for 22 versus 25 for 31. So that goes back to what I said earlier on in the season, where the Lakers they foul so much. They give the other team so many free opportunities with free throws. They gave the Bulls 31 opportunities. They made 25 of them. The Lakers got 22 opportunities. That's pretty good, but they only made 14 of them. They lose the game by 5. So between 19 turnovers, 8 missed free throws, and giving the Bulls 31 opportunities for free throws, like it's just ridiculous. And to only lose by 5 points. Like, there's no reason the Lakers should have lost that game. And what's crazy about it is, going into the game, this is one of the games that I was looking at on the schedule, and I marked it off as one of those games that I did not expect the Lakers to win. So going into the game, I wasn't expecting the Lakers to win. And then they start playing really well for the most part. They have 19 turnovers, a ton of missed free throws, and they only lose by 5 points. So you can't tell me that that wasn't a winnable game. Now, the Bulls were without Zach LaVine, one of their better players, but the Lakers were out without Anthony Davis and Malik Monk and Dwight Howard and Austin Reeves and Taylor Horton-Tucker, I think. I think he was still out for that game. They were without a lot of players, the Lakers were. Let's see. They were without Anthony Davis, Kent Bazemore, Avery Bradley, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Dwight Howard, Malik Monk, Austin Reeves. And like I mentioned before, that's a lot of players that play consistent time for the Lakers. Avery Bradley was a starter. Kent Bazemore was a starter earlier in the season. Dwight Howard has started for the Lakers. Taylor Horton-Tucker has started for the Lakers. Malik Monk is a big guy off the bench. Austin Reeves just hit a game winner against Dallas. So you're missing that many guys, and you only lose to the Bulls by 5 points with having 19 turnovers and only shooting 60% from the free throw line. You can't tell me that's not a winnable game. I mean, you can't. I'm not. I'm the one that was arguing it wasn't a winnable game, but that's what's frustrating about this Lakers team is you look at the team that's out there. The starters against the Bulls were LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, Wayne Ellington, Isaiah Thomas, DeAndre Jordan. You look at that and you're like, well, that's not ideal. That's not an ideal starting lineup. And then you have Carmelo off the bench, Rondo off the bench. Trevor Ariza, I forgot to mention, made his season debut against the Bulls. He played 15 minutes, hit a 3, played really good defense. And then you had Shawnee Brown off the bench also, who played 5 minutes. So, you're playing, you have a really small lineup or rotation. You have 8 guys against the Bulls were out with some sort of injury or COVID. And then the Bulls were missing a handful of players too, but the biggest one really was Zach LaVine, in terms of the guys that give them a lot of scoring and all that stuff. So real tough situation for the Lakers against the Bulls. Tough loss. They should have won it. That should be a win, and it wasn't. So those are the kinds of losses that are really frustrating. And this was a game that I wasn't even expecting to win, but when you play how you do and you're close, when you play how the Lakers played and you're close and you have an opportunity at the end of the game to win the game and you don't, those are the ones that are going to hurt down the stretch. So tough loss for the Lakers. And then moving on From that game, they play the Suns last night, Tuesday night. I actually had the opportunity to go to that game, which was awesome. It's always a great time to go to, I'm still calling it Staples Center, and see the Lakers in person. Bummer that Anthony Davis got hurt right before that game because he's, like I've mentioned before, one of my favorite players. So bummer not to be able to see him. But Lakers play the Suns. Awesome to see the matchup with LeBron and Chris Paul and Devin Booker and Russell Westbrook, and just a lot of star power in that game. So that was super fun to watch. And the Lakers played surprisingly well in the first half, and then everything went to crap after the first half. So Lakers lose that game 108-90. They end up just getting absolutely blown out. We were talking to our friends before the game who are Suns fans, and they were asking me what I expected about the game, and I was like, unfortunately, I think the Lakers will lose by 20. And everyone's like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. I hope it's, hopefully it's closer. I'm sure it won't be that bad. And it actually was pretty close in the first half. The Lakers had a great first quarter, ended up being up 25-24 at the end of the first quarter. They had a 10-point lead at some point in that first quarter. A lot of it was the Suns missing. They missed a lot of threes. They did not shoot very well in that game last night, at least not in the first half. The Lakers shot pretty well. Looking down the box score, LeBron James played great, which is fun. LeBron ended up with 34 points. Russell Westbrook ended up with 22 points. And then the rest of the Lakers starters, listen to this. So Russell Westbrook, 22 points. LeBron James, 34 points. Talen Horton-Tucker, 3 points. Wayne Ellington, 3 points. DeAndre Jordan, 1 point. That's the starting lineup for your Los Angeles Lakers and their scoring breakdown. So the Lakers just had 0 scoring. They only scored 90 points. It was basically they had like 80 points before they put in the bench players. So literally 0 scoring. The Lakers shot pretty badly. That's part of it. They shot 39% from the field and 20% from 3 versus Phoenix shooting 44% from the field and 29% from 3. So again, 29% from 3, not very good. But they shot just enough better than the Lakers in order to get the win. So the Lakers, they surprisingly didn't have too many turnovers in the game, which was at least something that was good the Lakers did. So the Lakers had 14 turnovers. It's still not ideal, but the Suns had 16, so they out-turnovered or under-turnovered the Suns. Points off turnovers, though, 22 points off turnovers for the Suns, 6 for the Lakers. So even though the Suns had 16 turnovers, the Lakers only got 6 points off those turnovers. And then, I mean, the Suns, it's one of those things where the matchup is just, and this is part of the reason why I thought the Suns would win by 20 points, and what I ended up basically being right on in this point is with DeAndre Ayton and JaVale McGee, and with the Lakers having Anthony Davis out, Dwight Howard was still out, only having DeAndre Jordan was the only big man for the Lakers, and then Trevor Ariza, Carmelo, and LeBron were playing like center minutes for the Lakers last night, and the mismatch is just unbelievable. I mean, JaVale McGee ended up with, how many points did he end up with? 10 points. JaVale McGee had 10 points, which it's about what he's averaging on the season. So he hit his average. Devin Booker, he went off for a little bit. He had 24 points. The Lakers actually, surprisingly, the Lakers did a pretty good job at keeping Devin Booker in check for the most part. The Suns just had a big scoring spread. They had 14 from Bridges, 24 from Booker. Chris Paul only had 11. DeAndre Ayton had 19. Cam Johnson had 14. Cam Payne had 10. JaVale McGee had 10. So it was just like there wasn't any one guy that went off. And again, the Suns, like I mentioned, didn't play that great of a game. Like the Lakers held them to 108 points. A team that just scored 137 points against the Hornets. Like the Lakers defense was pretty good in that game last night against the Suns, but the offense was just terrible. The 14 turnovers, not ideal, but unfortunately better than they've done, better than against the Bulls. Free throw shooting, again, terrible for the Lakers, 65% from the free throw line. I mean, Carmelo, it was just tough. It's tough having everyone out. Malik Monk is still out. Anthony Davis obviously is out. We mentioned that. Avery Bradley's still out. Dwight Howard's still out. Kent Bazemore's still out. Austin Reeves still out. Kendrick Nunn, who hasn't even suited up yet, is still out. So all these guys are still out. And then Carmelo Anthony got ejected. He played 15 minutes in the game. He hit a couple threes. I guess he only hit 1 3. But he had 7 points in 15 minutes, 4 rebounds, got ejected after those 15 minutes. And that's, when he's one of the guys that's playing the big man minutes, that's tough, a tough loss. Trevor Ariza got 20 minutes of playing time. He shot pretty well. I felt like he went 3 for 3 from the 3-point line, 4 for 4 overall, 12 points. So good to see Trevor Ariza kind of coming in and getting that stroke and hitting some shots. He played good defense as well. So good to see at least Trevor Ariza getting his sea legs back. And I think he's going to, once the team eventually gets back, I think Trevor Ariza will play a pretty big role with the Lakers, which is good to see. So, but again, just zero scoring. We've talked about this a ton on the podcast about how you need at least 3 guys to score a lot, right? In a game. To win a game, you need 3 guys to score well. So the Lakers had LeBron James with 34, which is good. Russell Westbrook at 22, which is good. I mean, I think you would prefer him to end with the game with at least 25, especially in a game where Anthony Davis is not playing. I feel like 25 is that sweet spot. So 22 is not bad though, especially when LeBron has 34. And then the next highest scorer was Trevor Ariza with 12. You need one more guy at least close to 20 points. And that goes to show with the Lakers lost by 18, but it was basically a 20-point loss. But you get one more guy in there with close to 20 points or 20 points, and it's a close game. It's a 1-point game. It's a Lakers win by 2 kind of situation. But instead you have Taylor Horton-Tucker, 3 points. He shot 1 for 13. He shot 7% from the field. 0 for 8. He took 8 threes. Taylor Horton-Tucker took 8 3-pointers, missed every single one of them. I get it. He's been out for a while. I saw on Twitter last night after the game that he mentioned that today or yesterday, the day of the game, was the first day he went out of his apartment because of the health and safety protocols. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. I'm sure he's got to get back in the rhythm, I hope. But I don't know why I mean, it's one of those things where he should not be playing starter minutes. He shouldn't have been playing 31 minutes with how badly he played. But the Lakers had no other option. I mean, given everything, preferably I would have given Trevor Ariza more minutes. But again, this is only his second game back for the entire season with his injury. So you want to ease him back in. There really is no one else. Carmelo Anthony got ejected. Isaiah Thomas did not play well. He only had 3 points. He shot 1 for 11, 9%, 0 for 6 from 3. Rondo didn't score at all. So there was no other option, unfortunately, and it was just really hard to watch. And LeBron played well enough in the first half to keep the Lakers in it. Trevor Ariza hit some big shots to keep the Lakers in it. Carmelo Anthony hit a few shots to keep the Lakers in it early. But down the road, especially after Carmelo got ejected, I mean, the option. Oh yeah, and then Wayne Ellington, 1 for 4 from 3 in the field. So it's just one of those things where when the shots aren't falling, it is what it is. You can only do so much, and especially given the injuries and the players out with COVID, there's only so much the Lakers can do. So I'm not super upset by that loss. The Suns are the best team in the NBA right now, at least record wise, and they're proving it against all sorts of different teams. And in order for the Lakers, the reason the Lakers were even close in the first half is because they were hitting their shots. The second half is when things went downhill. So if you're not going to hit your shots, you have no chance at beating a good team. You have no chance at beating a bad team if you're not making shots. It's what comes with the game of basketball, obviously, right? You can't win if you're not making shots. So tough loss. It was fun to see LeBron go off 34 points in 34 minutes, 7 rebounds. He shot well 13 for 19, 68%, 2 for 5 from 3. He made all his free throws, which I was very surprised about. Glad to see. He only had 2 turnovers. He ended with a plus minus of 0. So he was really the only bright side. Every other starter for the Lakers ended up with a minus. DeAndre Jordan with the most at minus 26. Rondo had a minus 26. It was basically anytime LeBron came off the court, and this is what you see with the plus minus. Anytime LeBron came off the court is when the Lakers lost their lead. Or it was either like a tie game or a 2-point game in either direction with LeBron on the court. And then LeBron left the court. The Suns went on a huge run. The Lakers just couldn't get it back. So shout out to LeBron for still being the Lakers' best player at 37 years old. It's unbelievable. So honestly, at this point, we just have to hope the Lakers can get their guys back. Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, Malik Monk, Austin Reeves. And the thing is, once they come back, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get back into it. There's going to be some bad games, assuming. I mean, especially considering how, like, you look at how Taylor Horton-Tucker played. I would expect more of that from the guys as they come back for the Lakers. So it's been a tough few games just with all these guys being out and everything, but I'm still hopeful. I was looking, someone asked how, I think it was Russell Westbrook, how he was feeling with the rest of the season with 50 games left in the season. And then I stopped and I was like, wait, there's 50 games left in the season still? Like, it feels like it's so easy, especially doing this podcast and watching all the games and stuff. It's so easy to get caught up in every single game and every week and just feel pretty disappointed with how the Lakers have played. They're right at 500 now. I think they're 16-16 on the season. And it's easy to get really bummed out about the Lakers and just where they're at on the season. But when I heard there were still 50 games left, which I wasn't thinking about it in that way, it's just a different perspective. But 50 games sounds like a lot. Lakers wouldn't do this. No team would. But if let's just say the Lakers won, they went on a 50 game win streak. They won 50 games. That would be one of the best records in the NBA ever, to only have 16 losses in a season. So, I mean, that's not going to happen. But when you think about it in that sense, it's like the Lakers still have time to figure things out. I mean, time is running out, and Anthony Davis being out for up to a month, well, at least a month, if not potentially 2 months, makes things all that much more difficult. But once we get the guys back, I feel hopeful we can turn things around. Looking at the rest of the month, Lakers play the Spurs on Thursday, who are 12-18, but they've also played fairly well recently. They blew out the Clippers 116-92. They beat the Jazz by 2 points, 128-126. But they've also lost to the Hornets. They've got blown out by the Hornets. They lost to the Kings by 7. They have both beat the Nuggets and lost the Nuggets. So the Spurs are a somewhat inconsistent team. The Lakers have played them twice now. I think they're 2-0 against the Spurs so far. Currently looking at the ESPN matchup predictor, they have San Antonio predicted to win. They have a 50... it's basically 50-50. It's 50.5% in favor of the Spurs, 49.5% for the Lakers. It's it's one of those games where the Lakers should win this. They have beat them before, but given Anthony Davis being out and not knowing who's going to be back from the COVID protocol stuff, it's really hard to predict. So the Lakers' last 5 games, they've beat Orlando, beat Dallas, and they've gone on a 3-game losing streak against Minnesota, Chicago, and Phoenix. And then, like I mentioned, San Antonio's been off and on. They've literally the last 5 games, they've won, lost, and then won. So they are predicted to lose their next game because they beat the Clippers in their last game. So that's good for the Lakers at least. So, I mean, it's a winnable game for the Lakers. They should win this game. They should be able to beat the Spurs. And then they go on to play the Nets on Christmas Day, which, like I mentioned before, is a winnable game for the Lakers in the sense that Christmas being Christmas Day, LeBron's going to come out and play well. Other guys are going to come out and play well. I that's typically how it goes. But at the same time, you look at how they played against Phoenix, where they played well in the first half, and then they just completely lost it in the second half. That's also very possible. So I wouldn't typically count this one as a winnable game for the Lakers. Just the Nets are 21-9. They're playing well. They're I mean, I guess it's pretty crazy. I'm actually surprised by this. And again, I haven't really looked into what's going on with the Nets currently. I'm pulling up the injury report. So the Nets are missing. Oh, Durant's out and Harden's out. That's why. With COVID protocol stuff. So Blake Griffin's day to day with the knee. LaMarcus Aldridge is out with COVID protocol. Kevin Durant's out with COVID protocol. James Harden is out with COVID protocol. So, and then Kyrie Irving is in health and safety protocol. So the Nets, all their best players are out right now. So that's why the Lakers are predicted to win. So if that's the case, then this is definitely a winnable game for the Lakers. But again, you never know. Christmas is in a few days. They could completely be back and given that. So if Durant is out, if Harden is out, that's great. You know, the Lakers should win that game. And the Lakers need the win. The thing is typically, like the last 2 seasons, if the Lakers were playing the Nets and I saw that Harden and Durant were out and stuff, I would almost be a little bummed because I would want to have that like milestone game for the Lakers to see how they do against another top team in the league. But considering where the Lakers are right now, we know they're not playing at a championship level right now just because they can't with all the injuries they have and the guys that are out and everything like that. They're not playing at a championship level, so I don't really care about those milestone things right now. I just want the Lakers to win games at this point. So whatever break the Lakers can get, I'll take because we've been dealt a pretty tough hand so far this season. I mean, other teams have as well. It's not just a Lakers thing, but part of it is self-inflicted with the brand new team. You know, we have only 3 guys this season were returning from previous seasons: THT, LeBron, and Anthony Davis. Everyone else is brand new, so that there's some growing pains there. So that's self-inflicted. And then between the COVID protocol stuff, and guys just being on this like rotating in and out situation where you just don't even know who's playing any given night, and then the Anthony Davis injury recently, things have been tough for the Lakers. I feel like, I mean, the Bulls have dealt with some stuff, right? But I feel like the Lakers have been dealing with quite a bit. It's funny because a lot of it with the Lakers are role players, which for like the Nets, for instance, being like missing Durant and missing Harden, like that's really tough to miss 2 of your best players. But for the Lakers missing Malik Monk and Avery Bradley, like guys that typically step up in a role player type situation, it's hard. I feel like it's almost harder to get role like Rondo to step up and play at the level that Malik Monk has been playing. Things like that. So that being said, I'm just at a point where I want the Lakers to get any break they can get to get some wins in the win column. So Spurs coming up next on Thursday night, and then the Nets on Christmas Day. I'm not totally sure when my next episode will be, given that I've been typically on like a Wednesday, Saturday schedule, and Christmas is on Saturday. So I'll probably do one maybe the day after Christmas and recap the Spurs and Nets games. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go Lakers. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lakers Carpool. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and share it on social media with your friends. You can find the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or most places where you listen to podcasts. Again, thank you so much for listening, and go Lakers.